Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to the last session today. I won't present a final product or a final pipeline. This is work in progress, and I want to show the intermediate results that we could receive for finding intra-epoch and inter-epoch feature correspondences between historical aerial images. Motivation, I don't have to say much for this audience. There's the ongoing digitization. We saw it in all the presentations of yesterday. And with the digital images, we can do a lot of things. For example, we saw yesterday also some kind of applications in glaciology, land cover analysis, and so on. And I have here an example of the city of Dresden, where I'm from. But we can only go back on the ArcGIS website to 2017, so there is still room for improvement and for using these historical images. I think it is of relevance here to present a little bit my background, because I mainly worked with terrestrial historical images. I just finished my PhD thesis and published it in October 2022. And I developed a complete workflow for structure from motion for mainly these terrestrial images. As we can see here in these images, they have large differences in radiometric quality and also geometric quality. But I tried to find an example where I used some kind of oblique image also for this workflow. And also a little bit more on the background and what we are doing here for the type font extraction. This is the structure from motion workflow. I think for most of the people it is familiar, and I won't focus here on every step, but for the terrestrial images we had to focus on every step and modify single steps to really get a complex structure from motion model. And I would say I start where the conventional software, like for example Archisoft Metashape or Pix4D, fails. Then I try to modify the workflow and improve it. And today I will mainly focus on this step. So we heard it before from Arnaud that sometimes the type font extraction is very challenging, and overall you can say it is the step of feature matching, but it is really divided into 3 steps of feature detection. You have to find unique features in the image pairs, then you have to describe them distinctively, and then you have to match these descriptors. And I tried a lot of algorithmic methods first in my work. SIFT, I think most of the people here know SIFT, some other algorithmic methods, and I was not very successful on the historical terrestrial images with these methods. I got some good results, but they were not optimal. In an optimal case, you would have as a matching ratio, so that means that the number of inlier matches divided through the total number of matches would be exactly 1, then you have only inliers. And additionally, you would like to have a lot of tie points for a good result. And then somebody on a conference asked me, did you try neural networks for feature matching? It was in 2019, and it really improved the results on a benchmark data set that I created for this purpose and testing methods. And today I will focus on these last 2 methods with almost here 1.0 correct matches or a matching ratio, and on the superglue method and on the disk method. And yeah, we want to show if it works also on the aerial images for type font extraction and matching. Here are some short results for the methods. So this is one quite difficult image pair. It does not look so difficult for a human, but the left image is a postcard. It is very blurry. It has some image artifacts, and it is really complicated to find feature matches. And there we have problems with the conventional methods, and we use these learn methods, and we can see that they gradually improved after the years they were published, and today I will mainly show this last method, disk and superpoint and superglue in combination, as they provided the best results for the historical terrestrial images. And this is an example what I did, what is the quality of these images, of the terrestrial images, and how the scene looks like in our structure for motion workflow. So this is not Metashape, ArcGIS of Metashape, but Colmap, which is mainly used in the computer vision society. And now we have the question, can this workflow be applied on historical images taken at the same time and at different times? And I already referred here to Lulin because she mainly did the same thing at the same time, tried also some kind of same methods, and they had in the introduction these nice words for this intra-epoch and inter-epoch. I think, I hope it will not double everything in our presentations, but I think there are also some differences what we are doing. And the whole thing is a cooperative work, so Annette was the one who asked me, can you maybe try your methods for the aerial images? And Denis was very interested in having some of his data sets processed, where he puts his data into Metashape, tried the type point extraction and alignment of images, and he got no results. So he really asked us, we can't do anything with these images, can you do something for us? And I didn't know if it works, but I started with the inter-epoch data set. So these are 4 different epochs in southern France, where they developed their time shift method. It is quite popular already, and these were able to be processed in Metashape. So I started with this one as a proof of concept if our methods work on this inter-epoch data set. So a transfer of these terrestrial methods that were trained on terrestrial data sets or trained on synthetic data but optimized for terrestrial data sets, do this work for the historical data sets. Yeah, and it was just a proof of concept, and what are the challenges maybe we run into, and is there an open source solution so that we can go away from Metashape, which was not working quite well for these images. As I already said, the challenge in the historical data sets is to automatically find type points. We heard a lot of examples here that most of the times it works quite well, but not always. And I really want to try the data sets where it doesn't work. This data set could already be processed, as they showed in the paper, but when I talked to Denis, I think he said they had to have a very long processing time. They had to set the extracted type points from Metashape to a very high level, and I think they processed 2 or 3 days for this data set. So it was time consuming, and they had also to modify parameters that they could match the data to each other. Yeah, so does it work with the proposed terrestrial method? So I just used it like I had it on my computer for the terrestrial images, and on the top we have a data set from 1971. So here is the image pair without the feature matches, and here is the image pair with feature matches, and intra-epoch it works, 1971. And there's another example for inter-epoch data sets. So we have a comparison between 1971 and 2001. And I think it is quite hard to see, but there's some kind of river that appears here again. And so I could also verify it with my human eye that these feature matches are correct. So these were the first results. We had, as I said, 148 images, and we were not able in the standard workflow to process all of the images. This was the largest model. Colmap often generates more models, but I was not initially able to merge these models. So this was the first model, 81 images, and this is the result for superglue, but the other feature extraction method disk showed also similar results, but not all images were registered. then I think Lulin's paper came out and they had to face the same challenges. So there's the superglue and the disk method are not rotational invariant. So if the plane turns, or you have a flight strip that is rotated by 180 degrees, it cannot be directly matched. And then we have a problem with the image resolution, as these methods were developed for terrestrial images. There's a maximum resolution. For example, for superglue, it is recommended to process with a maximum side length of 1,600 pixels. That is nothing in comparison to the aerial images. But I was still quite satisfied with the results, because I know, okay, there are these challenges. I could process here further. I could optimize the results here. But it was not necessary, as this data set had already been processed. But as a proof of concept, it was successful. And then we wanted to try a more difficult data set that has not yet been processed. And here we have a data set of the tropical rainforest. So maybe I looked like the audience when I saw the data, because I did not find any type points with my WWII at first. So I have some markers here for you. There's a river arm. I think it's almost not visible on the slides. And there's another river arm. But it would be quite challenging even for a human to find 1,000 type points by clicking between these images. Surface meta shape provides no results, and it was really interesting to do these images work with the learned methods. And so I tried both methods. On the top we see the superglue method, and on the bottom we see the disk method. And for the superglue, this is the method that worked the best for the terrestrial images, but as we can see here, it matches the border of only the border of the historical aerial image. And this looks quite promising. As we can see here, we have here these several regions, but there are not so many type points. So, as I said, I work mainly with the superglue method, and I could not believe that it doesn't work on these images, because it works on drawings and it works on so many different images. And so I started here, and I said, okay, maybe I need to crop these regions, or I need to resample with the fiducial marks. That was the first step. Did not get better results. It matched only these small corners here. So I did a manual cropping. I just wanted the method to focus on the middle or of the center of the image, but no better results. Then, as I told you, the method works with 1,600 pixels. So I thought maybe it doesn't have enough information. So I did a tile-based approach. I cut out 1,600 pixels for the complete aerial images, and then I tried to match these tiles between two different image pairs, but still no better results. As we can see here, we get no improvement, and even if it finds feature matches here, they are completely wrong, and mostly these corners are matched. So I focused more on the other method, on the disk method, and tried different adaptations. I started with the standard processed image size, which is, I think, also 1,600 pixels, and let the method find unlimited type points. Then it takes a while, but the result was not really better. I increased the image size and stayed with the unlimited type points. Processing time got even longer, and still no better results, even worse. And I tried several different parameter configurations, and in the end I found some good configurations. So this is the maximum image size I could process on the GPU, but it is recalculated to the full image size. So that is quite good for the method. I can really work on the full image, but it's only resized for the feature extraction, but it is recalculated on the full resolution image. And there I got around 2,000 type points for every image pair, which was really impossible before. And this is then one flight strip you receive. As I mentioned, we had 27 images, and this is the longest flight strip I received with only 10 images. And just last week I asked Denis what can we do, because there is they are numbered, the data is numbered, and there's a gap between 192 and 222, and there's no overlap between the flight strips. So the results may be the best results that we can reach using this method. We can only register the single flight strips. Maybe when I talk to some people here, with the Congo dataset or ANO, maybe we can fill the data gap and then we can process a whole area. Nonetheless, I also tried to do dense matching, and I was really surprised that you can really get a structure for this kind of area, for this tropical rainforest, and that you can recognize some rivers and some of the canopy and trees, and that it worked quite okay. But as we can see here, there's also a gap. Here we have only very few tie points, and then there is a gap. But could be also interesting with the method ANO just presented, maybe to fill this gap. So I'm already coming to the conclusion. There is no plug-and-play solution yet. However, I try to do something open source, and I also want to publish the method so that other people can use it. But it is often required that we have to do parameter tuning. So I really have to go into the code and modify the parameters as they are usually for the terrestrial images. And then ColMap is the program that is quite similar to Metashape, but it is focusing more on urban scenes and terrestrial scenes, and they have to modify the parameters of the bundle adjustment manually so that it converges in the end. A result is also that the matching strategy is trained on the terrestrial images and on synthetic data work on aerial images, sometimes limitedly, but they work. And we have quite a good distribution of tie points, and we are often able to find more tie points than Metashape, that we could compare this in our results. Persistent challenges are that I cannot estimate the accuracy of the result, because we didn't know exactly where it was in Congo. We have no ground control points at the moment, nothing. So for this data set, I can't estimate the accuracy. And we have this persistent challenge with the image size, that the methods are not programmed for these kind of image sizes. So I think Lulin will also show something, how we can maybe use a tile-based approach. And then there's the rotational invariance of these methods. SIFT is rotational invariant, but these methods are not. And so you have to consider rotating all. One option would be to know the rotation beforehand, that you know the flight plane, or another thing would be to pre-rotate the images in all four possible directions, so by 90 degrees, and then you can get the correct rotation. You will also see that later. And one could say, okay, maybe there don't exist that many data sets that cannot be processed. We saw a lot of applications for countrywide scale, and it seemed that every data could be processed. But actually, a lot of people now came to me. So, for example, we had this spy rocket Corona data set, where at our institute there's a guy who clicks 1,000 tie points in these images to georeference them. So there's also an option to automate that process. We had one example for a glacier, a very recent example, but only 3 aerial images, and it was not possible to process them in Metashape. We got also better results using the presented method. Denis has also a dataset of Tunisia, which is not be able to process the Metashape. And for accuracy estimation, I asked recently Elisa if I could have some parts of the time benchmark dataset, so I could try using the disk method on this time benchmark dataset, and I could compare for accuracy. But I just processed the images last week. I was happy that I could process all of the images of one one epoch in 1984, and now we can do accuracy estimation and can also validate our process. And as a final remark, as I mainly work with the terrestrial images, I would really love to connect all these steps together. So start from the terrestrial images, have these oblique images of the same city, and go into the terrestrial images. Because often for the terrestrial images, we have problems in georeferencing. And if we could connect all the steps together, I see a large potential. So that's it. Thank you.
My name is KNUTH. I'm a PhD student finishing up at the University of Washington in Seattle. I'm in the Civil and Environmental Engineering department. I'm working with David Sheen, also Amelie de Heck, who pointed me to this workshop. And I'm here visiting my family in Europe for the first time since the start of the pandemic, so that's a great one to stop by. Also, thank you for the opportunity to present. Maybe another name worth pointing out is Oleg Alexandrov. He works with he's the maintainer of the ASP NASA AUSTRIA pipeline, which is one of the primary tools we use for photogrammetry and ICP co-registration. Briefly, I'll be presenting an approach, maybe a different way of thinking about solving the co-registration problem or getting geodetically accurate DEMs. With ICP co-registration, and I hope it's interesting. Just a quick view. This is the view of Seattle, and in the distance you see Mount Rainier. This is from Kerry Park. It's a nice place to live. It's a different view. Seattle down there, Mount Rainier in the distance. You can also vaguely see Mount Adams, and over on the right is Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980. This is where we are in the world. You can see here the Pacific plate is subducting under the North American plate, and that's what causes this chain of stratovolcanoes. And this is one of the things we're interested in studying, which are the ice masses on top of these volcanoes. We consider them our water towers for the region. It's a nice lab. We use many different techniques. Out there in Washington, we use ISAT-2 satellites, worldview stereo. I'm the only one working on historical photographs, which is why it's a real pleasure to speak to you here today. And just some photos of the glaciers that we study in this region. This is Deming Glacier. And if we look, you can see it's not as simple of a story of the glaciers are just declining in this region. There's a lot of decadal variability in the climate. On the left, you can see Deming and Easton Glacier that were smaller in 1947 than they actually are in today, around 2016. So there's, and in the center, 1977, from the historical images, you see a big advance for Deming on the top and also Easton Glacier. And this is a pattern we see for all those stratovolcanoes. So we're interested in kind of what the glaciers are doing, especially since the story isn't simple. There's major rivers that run from these glaciers, and they provide important ecosystem services. For example, for the salmon fishery, stream and temperature flow buffering at the end of the season. This is just a bit of motivation for our work. 5 USGS benchmark glaciers have been used to study this ice system between the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And you can see there are many, many more glaciers than there are benchmark glaciers. So we would like to use historical photographs to reconstruct digital elevation models and get geodetic mass balance for the region. And here's on the left from the IPCC report, we can see one of the time series put together by Michael Semp, who's actually with us here in the room. And there's the temporal density of measurements that go back to the 1940s is just not that dense. So we would like to reduce the uncertainty of these measurements for the long time. So long-term measurements of glacier change are temporally and geographically sparse, and historical image archives provide an opportunity to augment the record. The archive I've been working with is the North American Glacial Aerial Photography Dataset. It was collected by Austin Post. The time range is roughly from the 1950s to the 1990s. They collected about 100,000 photographs. Ground resolution is generally less than 1 meter. See one example there. A lot of these photos were published in the book called Glacier Ice by Austin Post and Edward LaChapelle. It's a really nice book documenting the glaciers in this region. And we can see that the spatial coverage lines up in that area quite nicely. Matt Nolan from the University of Alaska Fairbanks scanned in 20,000 of the 100,000 images. And he used the Vexel Ultrascan 5000, scanned them at 20 micron, 8-bit single-band geotiffs, and that's roughly their size. So it's a good data set to study these glaciers in this region. And they were they're provided via the National Science Foundation Arctic Data Center. So Matt Nolan got a grant. I think it was around $300,000. If you're interested in the economics of it, and did the scanning himself with the team at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Some of the photos are also available via the U.S. Geological Survey Earth Explorer archive. There's 2 million additional single aerial frame photos there. Generally, they're available at 25 micron resolution, but you can also special order 7 and 14 micron scans. And so to work with these archives, I developed the HIP, so Historical Image Preprocessing Library. All the code is available online. It allows you to filter by space and time, download the imagery, and preprocess. And right here, I would just like to say that when you're providing these data, these cloud-optimized formats are really, really helpful. So why are they helpful? They allow you to do byte range requests for the data, so you don't have to pull all the images down locally. Rather, you can, if I'm looking for fiducial markers and I know it's a certain part of the image, I don't need to load all that data at once. So this is just a side note that providing things in, I think it was the Spanish archive I saw, they mentioned cloud-optimized geotiffs. That makes me happy. So it's something to consider for us, maybe scientists who are writing programmatic software to work on the data. That's the preferred method. Okay, challenges. I don't need to tell this room, but images can be distorted due to film degradation and scanning. Camera positions are often inaccurate or unknown. Images were sometimes collected with limited stereo overlap, which makes reconstructing the intrinsics, optimizing the intrinsics a bit difficult. Overlapping blocks or clusters of images can also be unknown. So you have this big archive and you don't know what really belongs together and how to really scale the processing to efficiently work through it. And standard processing methods are labor and time intensive, such as picking fiducial markers and GCPs. That's not great. So we've tried to automate a lot of these things. And this entire workflow also works without any GCPs. That's what I'm presenting here today. Okay, so it's a bit of a high-level overview, but first we'll talk about image standardization. So we use OpenCV to detect fiducial markers when they're present. Most of the time they're not. We only have pseudo-fiducial markers, so that's kind of what we have to work with. And then we correct the film distortion. If we have the calibration reports to known dimensions, this can help, but if you have a lot of images, the self-calibration of intrinsics actually does a really good job. So, we didn't see that big of an improvement by doing these corrections. It did improve it a little bit, but mostly only for cases where you have 4 images. Idea, we find the principal point, crop all the images to a standard dimension, do some contrast-limited histogram equalization. This also didn't always help improve feature matching over terrain that doesn't have a lot of texture, but maybe it will in more challenging instances. So to do this block detection or cluster detection, we first run a match point detection to separate out all the kind of individual clusters of images. Because we're not picking GCPs, we are going to align I'll talk about this more in a minute, we're going to align the DNs that are produced by each block separately, and that's why we want to separate them out for processing this efficiently. It's done with brute force matching, which of course you can't apply to the entire archive, but if your target area is, for example, one stratovolcano, it's okay to do the brute force matching for maybe 500, 600 images. It's been working okay. Okay, so multi-temporal bundle adjustment. This figure is from Ilkka Koppela, published in his work in 2006. I really like it because I think it describes the idea quite well. The main thing we use it for is to improve the intrinsic camera models and get rid of kind of doming artifacts, since we're not using GCPs that usually allow you to control for that kind of error in the camera model. And just to take a closer look, he also in this paper presents the idea that if you have a modern image, let's say a drone image with really good RTK positioning, you can hold the extrinsic and intrinsic parameters fixed, and that will help align the multi-temporal bundle for all the other images that you're throwing into the optimization routine by having shared tie points. So I really recommend this paper if you're interested in this a bit more. And then the final part here is the ICP co-registration. So we have a modern, let's say, LiDAR reference DM, and then we have our historical DM. We mask out the things that we know have changed. So we apply a glacier mask or a land vegetation mask, and we pull these on the fly from public archives. So we're not going in and hand digitizing these things, but if you have those masks available from other data sets for your country, that's what you could use. And the ICP co-registration corrects for rotation, translation, and scale. So when the dense cloud and then maybe the DM that you grid comes out of the software, it might be totally rotated in the wrong place, right? But with the ICP co-registration, you can translate it, rotate it, and even adjust for scale to get it in the right place. And this, what ASP gives you is a 12-parameter transformation matrix, which you can then apply back to the bundle adjusted cameras, get those in the right place, and also project your ortho image mosaic to where it should be. Another nice advantage of this approach is that you're not limited really to the resolution of your reference DM. So it doesn't have to be a super high resolution reference DM where you're picking your GCPs from. You can use things like the Copernicus DM, which is from the synthetic aperture radar Tandem X. It's at 30-meter resolution, and because you're finding a best fit solution between your dense historical point cloud and the reference DM, it puts it in the right place. And I'll have another figure to talk about that. A basic way of looking at this, in blue, we start with, oftentimes we don't know the elevation of these images, so we try to make an educated guess for where they were flying in this archive. You start in blue with a fixed elevation, then in orange you can see the camera positions after bundle adjustment, and then in green you can see the camera positions after the ICP transform has been applied. So this is the basic idea, or another way to think about it. So it works for different data configurations. On the left you have 18 timestamps for South Cascade Glacier. In the center you have kind of these multiple clusters or multiple blocks over Mount Baker. It's a bit of a larger data set. And then on the right we have Glacier National Park. This was about, also again, I think it was 700 images covering about 8,000 square kilometers. It's a big region. And here, multi-temporal bundle adjustment, we did throw in some more images that helped constrain the camera model, and that we ended up having some doming in this really large data set. Without the multi-temporal bundle adjustment, it was about 100 meters of a dome. And then after multi-temporal bundle adjustment, there is still a systematic error of maybe 10 meters, which we then just removed by fitting a polynomial error surface and subtracting that. And it's good enough to do our analysis. But more work is to be done there. But ideally, the more images you can add to the solution, the better. These are just the camera footprints over South Cascade on the left. On the right, you can see the residuals over stable ground as an idea of that accuracy. Maybe a better way to look at this is, so on the top left you have South Cascade Glacier. In the top center, panel B, is the per pixel DEM count. So this is kind of our coverage, and usually we only have the terminus. Feature matching is a bit harder up in the accumulation zone. Am I talking too fast? Maybe. No? Okay. And then on the right, you can see that in the 3D stack of the historical DMs, we see what's changing. So the glacier is changing, and our stable ground is quite aligned for all these time steps, right? So this gives us confidence in the result. On the bottom, you see the normal distribution of residuals over stable ground for all the different DMs, and they're generally have a standard deviation less than 1 meter. So we feel quite good about this. This is the standard residuals with respect to the stable ground in the reference terrain. If we just, on the far right, take the per pixel deviation for stable ground values within the stack, we can also see that the variability is less than 1 meter. So the stack is self-consistent over stable ground. But visually you see that also in panel C. Same thing for Mount Baker. I'll go through this quickly. You can see where we have DEMs and where the change is happening, where the change is not happening. This is a closer look at the improvement through multi-temporal bundle adjustment for the intrinsics. So on the left, you have the DM difference map. If you don't throw in multiple images to help constrain the solution, and you can see that there's some clear systematic errors and doming happening there. The bottom panels show the spatially autocorrelated errors, so it's just another way to visualize this, if you will. And then on the right, you see everything's now in white, so that means there's very little differences over stable ground after having improved the intrinsics of the camera model through the multi-temporal bundle adjustment. It's also worth mentioning that you can introduce error if you aren't careful when you manually pick ground control points. Right? So if we have a free-floating multi-temporal bundle adjustment, we show here in the purple panel, that's the second row, that our results are quite good. The residuals are very small over stable ground. Everything looks white. And on the top, we compared that to DMs created from the same images with manually selected. These are already published results. We didn't artificially introduce error here. It's not like we're trying to make the point. So these are already published open data from the USGS DEMs that they had created by hand using manual GCP selection, and you can see that there's systematic error in those in the stable surfaces. It's nice to have an automated approach that both improves the result and is fully reproducible. So we don't call it a fully automated pipeline because you do need some initial guess for where these cameras were, but the general process is rather robust. So in red, you see that they guessed that okay, all these these 5, these 10, these 20 images are all at this red location, and after the process is run, we can see where the final camera positions end up. And so we can correct for errors in our testing between 4 and 5 kilometers. In green, you see that there was a big altitude error for these cameras. The metadata in Earth Explorer was, surprise, incorrect, and we were able to correct for that. So it's rather robust, and this can maybe help expedite the process of scanning and creating metadata when you're starting without any position information. This is, again, looking at the co-registration success to a lower resolution DM. So on the left, you have the 1 meter LiDAR DM, and then the variance over in the historical DM stack in panel E on the bottom left. Panel B and F, they belong together. That's the 30-meter Copernicus DEM, and then you have the historical DEM stack that's been co-registered to that Copernicus DEM. And if you compare these two, you can't really see where the difference is. They both look pretty good. Just on the top right, you have the actual difference between the LiDAR and the Copernicus DEM. We can see that the Copernicus DEM does have errors, and that will cause issues. So if we compare these NMAD maps right here, just take the difference between the two, we can see the areas where there actually is some variability. So that can, of course, introduce errors. And these are phase unwrapping issues from the synthetic aperture radar as it's moving over this terrain. But the point is, you're not limited to, I have to have a LiDAR, right? You can use a lower resolution, globally available DEM, such as the Copernicus DEM, and maybe that will help in places like the Congo or elsewhere. Good, so the software is publicly available, HIP and HSfM. It's written in Python. It wraps both the AIM stereo pipeline for the ICP co-registration as well as Metashape. We have two comparable workflows, but I've primarily been using Metashape because it does the multi-temporal bundle adjustment robustly for our cases, maybe not always. The manuscript, I'm waiting for the email that it's online, so it should be online this week. And we describe everything in detail. Maybe we can round up to 150 on the studies, but I think we hit all the points that Livia was looking for, so that made me feel good. And yeah, if you're interested in ICP co-registration, I really recommend the NASA AIM stereo pipeline. You can also use it for the photogrammetric processing, and it wraps different flavors of the ICP tool. Does a lot of things for you. Also does things like transform from hill shading, so it finds the SIF feature matching between two hill shades to get a coarse co-registration first, and then it refines it with ICP. So it's quite a useful tool and fully open source. Marcel Proust, he was a 100-year jubileum recently at his passing, and I like this quote: "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but having new eyes." So I'm happy to share new methods to revisit these old data sets with you. Thank you.
So hello, the title might be a bit confusing because of the combination of implicit and deep, but it's actually two different things. And I'm working together with Marvin Burgess, who presented yesterday in a common project about World War II aerial reconnaissance images. Marvin works on the unexploded bomb detection, or rather crater detection, and I work on the georeferencing. So maybe not all of you know how this generally works. So for detecting unexploded ordnance, usually one starts with photogrammetric analysis, just because it's the cheapest way of finding out whether if there is no risk at all. If there is, if the analysis says that there might be a risk, then the more expensive works proceed, which are then done in the field. And the photogrammetric analysis works on first of all the aerial images together with the flight plans or overlay indexes. So we've seen a presentation by ANCAP, but there's also the US archive of NARA. And soon after the aerial flights, these photo groups, they roughly oriented or located the aerial images. For these reasons, you have paper maps where you can look up the very coarse position and some metadata like the image scale and the focal length for these reconnaissance images. And then the second kind of data that is used is records of bomb attacks, which some of our project partners call literature. And this is important in order to find out the bomb load and the fuse type. So there are basically, as I learned, two fuse types. One is an impact fuse, which is supposed to detonate immediately, and the other one is a delay fuse, which was supposed to detonate after some time. And this is very important to know because depending on the fuse type, you can actually defuse the bomb on the field, wherever you are. But if it's a delay fuse, you can only detonate it in place, which means you need to evacuate the whole area, which is a disaster, of course. So for these reasons, one not only needs to find out where unexploded ordnance might be located in the images, but you also need to be able to associate each of those with a certain bomb attack, which means that you need to have a certain temporal resolution if you're in your image data set. Also some overlapping images, stereo images, they're of course beneficial in order to better stereoscopically verify if this is actually an unexploded bomb, a little, not a crater, but a little hole in the ground, or if it's something very common like anything. And so for these reasons, even for small project areas, there might be hundreds of images in question available in the archives. But these images, they are rather expensive, so it's, as far as I can tell from ANCAP, it's 30 to 60 pounds for a non-photogrammetric scan quality per image. And so to stay within within project budgets, to keep the analysis affordable, one needs to find a minimum subset of the available images, which is sufficient to do the analysis. Now, during when doing this subset selection, generally one needs to inspect each and every image just in order to check the quality. The metadata sometimes says it's cloudy or snowy or whatever, but you want to make sure that your specific project area is actually well imaged in that specific image before you purchase it. And for this, also during this image selection process, you need a better georeferencing in order to ensure the overlap with the project area and possibly with other images. So I said before that the coarse georeferencing is available from these overlay indexes, but at least in our project we don't use these overlay indexes directly, but we use a database of our partner company, and they don't store any rotation, any azimuth of the images, and so we assume this rotation to be completely unknown. And all of this used to be done, or still uses to be done with standard software by our partner company, which means that this coarse orientation, which was gained during the image selection process, was actually lost immediately, just because it was never recorded. So in order to just record this already better georeferencing, we developed a dedicated software, but with certain conditions imposed on ourselves. Most importantly, one user should not actually feel that this is also a measurement process in the background, but they should just proceed as fast as they used to do. And our approach to this was to hide the measurements, and this is why I came up with this implicit adjective of the first part in the title. Basically, what we do is we provide a large window where you can load various background maps as a reference, 2D reference, and you can of course zoom and shift them around. As background maps of course, the very basic one would be the current orthophoto, but alternatives are historic orthophotos where they are available. For example, in Vienna, that is the case. Outside of Vienna, not. But also topographic maps and cadastral maps. Yeah, and then the user is supposed to do the course orientation, needed to verify the overlap and so on. And this is not done based on corresponding points, but actually by shifting around the image area and scaling it of the aerial on top of the background map. And we hopefully came up with a more or less nice handling where you can set, where you can visualize one or more aerial images at the same time. Rotate them right on the mouse cursor. That is important because then you can actually choose two corresponding areas. So once you have one corresponding area, you shift the aerial to that location, leave the mouse cursor right there, and then rotate the aerial to match the second corresponding area. So basically you can be done quite quickly if you find two corresponding areas easily. So of course this beta transform is recorded, which is only a 2D similarity transform, more or less adequate for nadir images on more or less planar land, of course. And of course we aim at reusing that. So that is the interface I talked about as a QGIS plugin. You see as a background map along the borders, it's the current orthophoto of Lower Austria. And then we have many circles here. They all represent aerial images which may cover the project area, which is in the very center and magenta. Some of them have been maximized by just double-clicking on them, and they've already been coarsely oriented. You can also see a mixture of, a selection of image qualities that we have. So on the lower left, there's there are stripes visible. I don't know if you can see that. On the top we have very cloudy weather, and then on the left, on the smaller one, there's partly snow cover. Well, and you can also see that it's really a lot of images in question, and the whole process is quite challenging if you really want to find a good subset. Now, once you've done this course orientation, of course you can profit from that, just because it reduces the search space, and most of all you have a meaningful rotation of the image at hand. But still, an automated search for correspondences remains a challenge. We've heard about these challenges for historical images in general, but then there are additional challenges that come with wartime images, like these pictures were not taken during optimal weather conditions or times of day or days of year, but they were driven by war. And so there's cloud cover, snow cover, all kinds of things. And then, of course, the images were taken really long ago, before a reference orthophoto map might be available, like maybe 70 years even. And during that time, of course, a lot has changed throughout the countryside. There are whole settlements that have been built up or demolished and replaced by industry. Agricultural field borders may have changed, so basically what one can rely on in Austria is, on a very large scale, is forest borders. And now, since appearance is completely different, and that is again similar to historical images in general, classical image point features fail completely. And so we aim at using deep learning, like many people do today. Now, our situation is that little, but still some training data is available, which is based on projects of our partner company from the past. And Now, if we aim at retraining a certain CNN, then in my opinion, the matcher that we train must be end-to-end, meaning that we don't have this 2 or 3 step approach where we first detect points and then describe them and then match them, or we first, like in the very classical SIFT case, or not even 2-step, but it must be one network. In order to not be forced to distinguish bad features from bad matches. Yeah, and then with this image selection tool, I hope it's handy. One can hopefully gain a good subset more quickly. But still it's very elaborate. You need to really look at every image and find corresponding areas and so on. If we want to get rid of that, if we want to use the CNN already for providing improved georeferencing for doing the image selection, then rotational invariance is a must-have. Otherwise, we could just not use it. Use the CNN. Now, some quite general restrictions are the images to be matched. They must have the same resolution. We have quite different scales here. And the resolution of images, it may be quite limited by the GPU RAM. And well, results are promising, but still there are some outlier matches, of course. And at this step, we just do a robust similarity transform with a large enough threshold to cope with terrain undulations and other errors due to not modeling the transform as a strictly perspective transform. Oh, 2 identical slides. I first concentrated on a rather small data set of all the data our partner company has. It's 45 aerial images, all taken with the same camera, Fairchild K7, with 9x9-inch image area, and in this case 24-inch of focal length. The geometrical scan resolution is 22 microns, non-photogrammetric quality. Image scales range from 1 to 7,500 to 14,250. And as said, there is snow cover and clouds and all kinds of unwanted things in the images. Furthermore, these scans, as ordered from the archive, they have been, so to say, enhanced by our project partner. They aligned the scans such that they form a proper rectangle and cut the image contents. Partly they also cut off the fiducials, so yeah, this is probably, I mean, that there are, of course we could trace back these modifications to the original scans, but I haven't done so yet. Now the first, and these enhanced images, they come with GCPs, with image coordinates in these enhanced images and in object space, 10 to 15 GCPs per image. And they were used for doing rubber sheeting, meaning just a 2D spline unsmooth transform, meaning that there are gross errors in these GCPs since they are completely uncontrolled. Another question is, what if we use these GCPs, model the transform with a proper perspective, interpolating the GCP heights in current DPM. Then what we see here is something like the accuracy of these GCPs, and well, it ranges from between 200 and maybe 500 microns, which is, well, quite a number, and with some outliers at the very right. So now, what do these GCPs actually represent? Well, it's mostly building corners and their intersection with the ground, but then some, then there's the question, what was the reference data set used? It's a project from 10 years ago. well, I couldn't find any orthophoto that would represent that image, which is hopefully visible on the right top, to that location on the ground where there is a new, I don't know, whatever building much larger. Same thing here. I haven't found any traces of this, I don't know, garden corner. Yeah, and then some visual results, at least, of how the deep feature matching works. On the left, in the left column, we see an original aerial image. On the right, we see on the right top, we see the first attempt to or a detail of the orthophoto map selected according to the very gross location, according to the database, and the nominal image scale. So then we see in magenta some features that have been matched between the two images. I didn't connect them with lines to, well, enhance visibility. And we see here that based on, or nothing. Well, based on these feature points, we can estimate a transform, just a similarity, 2D similarity transform from one image to the other, which is indicated by this red rectangle. And using this, or this transform, then represents the next iteration, or the basis for the next iteration, which is the orthophoto to be used for matching in the lower row. So here, and well, in the title of these plots, you see the number of matches and the number of inliers according to our robust similarity transform. And well, you see that this increases from 129 inliers out of 394 to 454 out of 744. So we see quite an increase in the total number of matches and in the inlier ratio, which means that this image feature match, or this CNN, well, it's supposed to be rotationally invariant, but still a difference in scale makes a difference. And of course, well, the overlap is increased a bit, so that is to be expected. Also, we can see here that the distribution of residuals in image space, it decreases. We see it here in microns. Again, it's about millimeters actually, but I just use microns because that is my goal to, well, make this unit meaningful in the end. So some more examples. Here we see quite a cloudy aerial, also with some shadows of clouds. Well, it's just 40 inliers, but at least it increases to 125. Amazingly, it works. And then here we see that this aerial is initially rotated by 180 degrees, and still we match at least 15 inliers, which increases to 114 when we adapt maximize the overlap and use a proper scale and rotation. Well, here an example where it really doesn't work. There's lots of snow cover, which doesn't mean that it never works with snow cover, but at least in this case it doesn't. You see the selection image, the selecting window for the third stage. It would be really different from what it was at the second stage, so this is just a failure. Now, how to evaluate this using the manual ground control points? Well, I think the most direct way is to project the ground control point coordinates from object space using the exterior orientations gained with deep features. So here we see on the left top one of these aerials. We have some some features scattered throughout the image. And this is, well, one example where it works well. So in the lower row we see the distribution of, well, actually it's, sorry, in the left we see the precision of the deep features themselves using perspective transform from the deep object coordinates. So it's about, well, I would say 1 millimeter, which isn't so bad, but could of course be much better. And then on the right, we see the RMSE of all GCPs, of all images projected into image space of all images oriented with deep features, which is, well, between 500 and 1,000 microns. And now comparing this to the to this initial figure, I would say it's actually not so bad. It doesn't compare so bad to the manual ground control points. And then, well, what I left out is that there is one very obvious to do on my list, which is to do the matching in native resolution. We've heard that already. Well, that's just obvious. And just to make an estimate, I downsampled all the aerials to 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Originally they have 10 times more. So I hope to gain at least a factor of, I don't know, 5, which would be great. Then of course this is only a small subset of the data our project partner has available, or partner company has available. So of course this evaluation should be done on all of them. And then I mentioned that one of the restrictions we imposed on the CNN to be used is that it is trainable, which is, well, not, well, I mean, you can train most of them, but for example, superglue, you can't because the training code is just not available and would be lots of work to find them. So that's the end, and thanks for your attention.
Fabio for the introduction. Hello everyone, my name is ZHANG. I am a former PhD student in IGN France under the supervision of Evelina RUPNIK and Marc PIERROT-DESSEILLIGNLY. So today I'm going to present my PhD work, Feature Matching for Multi-Epoch Historical Aerial Images. So at the beginning, we are just interested in matching historical aerial images taken at different times. But it turns out that our method also works on modern aerial images and satellite images as well as the mixed images. So this is very practical for georeferencing historical aerial images because the modern aerial image and the satellite images are often accompanied with georeference. So the historical aerial images has a lot of merits, such as high spatial resolution, short time interval, stereoscopic acquisitions, and so on. So which makes them a valuable resource for environmental monitoring. So here in the left, I display the problem we are facing in our PhD. So imagine we want to do change detection, and we have images taken before and after the change. So in order to do multi-epoch comparison precisely, we need to do a bundle adjustment to estimate the camera parameters. And in order to do that, we need to find matches, which means similar points between images taken at different epoch. So our work focused on finding the matches between different epoch. This part is a very difficult part throughout the whole procedure, because even small errors in the location of the matches will lead to big errors in the multi-epoch comparison. And also, this is a very challenging part because, as we can see here, in order to match these images, we can see the scene changed a lot, and also we have different image tones, resolutions, scopes, and so on. And here I displayed the matches found by the state-of-the-art feature matching methods. So the blue line connecting the two images means the matches. So with no surprise, we can see it failed to find any good matches. So in the previous work, in order to match different epochs, it often involves metadata such as flight plan or GCPs, and also a lot of manual work. So our goal is to find a solution to find a lot of good matches completely automatic. Okay, so if we compare our program to a puzzle, here are the pieces we have. So, as the state-of-the-art matching methods, we have shift and super glue. So, we want them to be time invariant, rotation invariant, and suit large images in order to solve our problem. But unfortunately, none of them suits all the three conditions. And for matching materials, we have RGB images and also DSMs, which can be easily generated within the same epoch. This is already a solved problem. So here I displayed two RGB images over the same area taken at different times. As we can see, they look very different as the scene changed a lot. And here on the right, I displayed the corresponding DSM. As we can see, they look very similar because the landform doesn't change. But the DSM is not the final solution to our problem because they have their own problems. So, first of all, the lack of rich texture, and also they contain noises that is not tolerable to recover very precise matches. Therefore, we came out of three ideas and use these ideas in our workflow to solve the problems. So, first of all, our main idea is this rough to precise idea. It means we will first do a rough registration based on matching the DSMs, and here we are treating these DSMs as grayscale images. So we match this DSM, and it will give us an initial result that is robust but not precise enough. And then we will do the precise matching to improve the precision based on matching the RGB images. So this leads to our first contribution, which is to bring time invariant to our solution. So, for example, shift, even if shift is not time invariant, but when combined with our rough to precise idea, it can achieve a robust result thanks to the help of DSM. And also we have the tiling scheme and the rotation hypothesis adopted in our pipeline, which leads to the other two contributions, which is to scale up deep learning methods and also bring rotation invariance to our solution. And also, I'd like to mention that our workflow is fully automatic, and also we can adopt a new state-of-the-art feature matching methods when they come out in the future. Okay, so here I displayed the matches bound by super glue. as we can see, we don't have any good matches. But when combined with our 3 ideas, we can get a lot of good matches well distributed in the whole block. Our method opens the possibility for millions of historical images to play a part in diverse geoscience applications. And in the following, I'll focus on 5 representative applications we've tested to review the potential of our pipeline. Before we get into the details, I'd like to introduce the concept of DOD, which means difference of DSM, as already presented in Arnold's presentation. So after we use our pipeline to retrieve the matches between different epochs, we will regenerate the DSM in different epochs and followed by a subtraction to get the DOD. So ideally, the DOD should only display the real scene changes like this. But in a real case, dome effect will appear like this, or the bow effect as mentioned in Arnold's presentation. So it is due to poorly estimated camera parameters. So our goal is to eliminate this dome effect with our pipeline. Okay, now get to the first application is about landslide. So the test site is located in Alberona, Italy, and there is a slow landslide happened there, lasting from 1954 to 2010. And we have 2 historical epochs. One is at the beginning of the landslide, and the other one is at the end stage of the landslide. Oh, and also I displayed the configurations of the data set, the focal length, width, and height of the image, GSD, and also the overlaps and the flying height, image numbers. But we don't need these parameters as input to use our pipeline. This is just to give you an idea how different these 2 epochs are. Okay, so here are the images of these 2 epochs. So we have 3 images in the left and the 7 images in the right. So the red rectangle represents the overlapping area, and this green ellipse represents the landslide area. So if we zoom in, we can see the details before and after the landslide. And here is the demonstration of the matches we found between these 2 epochs. As we can see, we found a lot of well-distributed matches throughout the whole block. And based on this, we refine the camera parameters and we do a DOD. Before we show the DOD, I will first show the ground truth of the landslide. This is from an independent source, which is generated with a lot of manual work. But our method is totally automatic. So here we can see the landslide starts from this blue area, and it flows through this red part until the yellow part. So here are the DODs recovered in our pipeline. So firstly, we generate a DOD right after the rough registration. So this one is not precise enough, and we will and we also show the results after the precise matching. So the color changing from blue to red means the elevation difference changes from -10 meters to 10 meters. And also, the landslide area is labeled as in these black lines. So as we can see, in the result of rough concentration, our result is already robust enough to recover the signals at the source of the landslide. And after our precise matching, we can clearly see the signals along this piece. Okay. Now let's move to the second application, which is urban expansion. So this test site is located in Fréjus, France. It is an urban area, and we have 4 epochs. The 3 is historical epochs, and this one is modern epoch. So this is a very challenging case. As we can see, we have very different image tones, and also the scope is very different. And also, when we look at this GSD, we can see the resolution is also very different. So let's see. Oh, and also, due to time limitation, I will only show the result of the earliest and the latest epoch. When we look into the details, we can see the scene changed a lot. So there's a lot of buildings arise, and also we can see a newly built seaport here and also here. And this is the matches we found in this different epochs. As we can see, there are a lot of matches well distributed in the whole block. And also, these are the DODs from our rough concentration and the precise matching. So, in the left one, we can still see the dome effect throughout the block, because it is normal, because we only provide robust but not precise enough results here. But after our improvement of precise matching, we can see the dome effect is effectively alleviated. But in the meantime, the real scene change is kept. For example, this newly built seaport, the elevation difference is successfully detected here. Okay, so the third application is about land use. So this test site is located in Pays-de-Lac, France, which is also tested by President's presentation. But in our test, we mainly focused on matching aerial images to the satellite images. But due to time limitation, maybe we should just simply skip this. So we only show this is the earliest epoch, and this is the satellite epoch. And we can see the clouds in this satellite image, which will inevitably hinder the procedure. But it turns out that our pipeline works well on this extreme case. So these are the matches we found, well distributed and large number. And these are the DODs after rough and precise. So we have the dome effect here, but it is improved after the precise matching, and we can, but the real scene change is kept here. Okay, so the fourth application is about earthquake. This is the initial motivation behind this PhD finding. So here, this test site is located in Kobe, Japan. We have this earthquake happened in 1995, and we have 2 epochs, historical epochs, one before and one after the earthquake. So here you can see how they look like, these 2 epochs and the overlapping area. And these are the matches we found. And this is the ground truth, ground displacement caused by the earthquake. So in this application, we are not only interested in the DOD, but also we will further generate the orthophotos of each individual epoch, and we will do a correlation to calculate the ground displacement caused by the earthquake. And we will compare it to this ground truth. So this ground truth is from independent source and also generated with a lot of manual work. As we can see here, this line is the Nojima fault caused by the earthquake, and these small arrows represent the ground displacement. So we can see on the upper part of the Nojima fault, the arrows, they are mainly this way, and on the lower side, they are basically this way. So that is ground displacement like this. And this is the ground displacement calculated with our pipeline after rough and precise matching. These colors changing from red to blue represents the ground displacement changing from minus 2 meters to 2 meters. As we can see, the rough concentration, they failed to detect the signal because we need a very precise result to recover the signal. But after the precise matching, we can see this blue signal, which means this way of ground displacement, and in the lower part is the opposite direction, which means the signal is well detected. And the last application is about glacier image, but I think the time is already up, so I just quickly move. So we want to match these images fully covered by snow, so it is very difficult, and this is the result of SIFT and super glue. They failed to find any good matches, and this is the result of ours. Okay, the last slide of my presentation. So here I displayed several QR codes related to our publications and a series of YouTube videos, and also our code is available online in Mi'kmaq, and also we provide tutorials for the end user to use it, and this is linked to my PhD thesis. And this is feel free to email me if you need. So, in conclusion, we present a fully automatic pipeline to match multi-epoch historical aerial images without any GCPs and flight plan required. And also, our pipeline is implemented in Mi'kmaq. It is a free open source photogrammetric software, so feel free to use it. It's pipeline is available online. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
So my name is Peter Becker. I work for ESRI. Yesterday, somebody asked me the question, what is the Vector GIS company from America doing at EuroSDR? That wasn't quite the question, but it was pretty similar. So first I want to try to sort of clarify a couple of things. I mean, certainly most of you, I hope you know ESRI. Most of you actually have ArcGIS software, I know that. As for an American company, yes, we're originally an American company, but what a lot of people don't realize is that we do a lot of research in Europe. We actually have research centers in Zurich, in Stuttgart, in Cardiff, in Wales. The number of employees, directly or indirectly, in ESRI in Europe is about 2,500, if you count the employees working for the ESRI distributors. So we're not really a US company, much more a global company. So that's one thing. The other question was vector. I know ESRI 50 years ago or 40 years ago we were a vector company, but really it's not that the case at all. ESRI really is a full geospatial company, and we provide really a comprehensive imagery system. So, and what I mean by that is really that we handle all types of imagery, different formats of imagery, different platforms coming from aerial cameras, from satellites, We handle a lot of different modalities, from radar data to LiDAR data to aerial imagery. And we also provide a lot of the stuff as services. So we do huge amounts of work in imagery. We have literally hundreds, well over 100, maybe 150 people working purely on the imagery development side within ESRI, just to give you an idea of the amount of work that's been done in there. When we talk about a comprehensive imagery system, we try and sort of broaden it to define the sort of 5 key categories that are of interest to most people. And you will see management at the center, and it was brought up before. It's the management of the data that's actually very critical, but there are other components of the system which are also incredibly important. One is the content. Where does the content come from? Well, within ESRI, we have a lot of content that we provide. We have the Living Atlas. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We also work extensively with many, many different partners who provide a lot of imagery. People like BECKER and stuff like that, who's serving hundreds of millions of images through ArcGIS. Geodyne, they're here. They're also a partner. But we also work very much with the organizations, a lot of them the national mapping agencies, to enable them to manage the content that they have. A lot of the content we actually put into the Living Atlas. This is a set of curated data that we collect from multiple places. It's very often authoritative content that we make accessible to our users. Some of that content is content that ESRI licenses and basically provides to our users, and other is content that comes from, for example, the Sentinel program and the Landsat program. These are data sets. We serve all the Landsat and Sentinel data as services you can just directly access. There are 2 important data sets here specifically for this community. One is world imagery. Where did you get that control in the middle of Africa from? Well, world imagery actually provides a 1-meter global base map that we keep up to date, which you can use as control. Most other data sets that are available there, you cannot legally use them as control. Within ArcGIS, as long as you're using the data within ArcGIS, you can take ground control points, to the accuracy that the data sets are. They're sometimes only to 6-meter accuracy, you can use it. The other is a terrain model. We provide global terrain models. Some of those terrain models are global terrain models at 24-meter resolution with a 4-meter RMS, which for a lot of applications is perfect to generate ortho images. Not necessarily precise ones, but enough to get good approximate positions which you can then refine. Actually, there are other data sets that are also available there. Let's look at, folks, I want to talk a little bit about it as management and how do we actually manage the data. So we talk a lot, I mentioned that we support the different modalities of data. People talking about formats, cloud-optimized geotiffs and stuff like that. Yeah, we support it all. We support the different sensors. But what we have focused a lot about is to develop the data models that allow us to handle these data sets. We're not talking about 10 images, 20 images. We're talking about millions of images. We have a service which has got 1.2 billion images in it. They're not aerial images, they're terrestrial images, but still, we're talking about data models that can handle very, very large numbers of data. And then, once those data are managed, be able to stream those out and make them accessible to the people. Because sitting in an archive is bad, stored away. In a digital form is better, but having it accessible in the web really makes it useful. So we put a lot of effort into the data models, as well as the systems by which we can share and make this data very efficiently accessible. There are 2 data models I want to bring to your attention. One is called a mosaic data set, and one is oriented imagery. And these are really how to manage data in a database. It's not the imagery, it's the meta information about the imagery. Orientated imagery is the data model we came up probably about 6 years ago now. It's really to handle all the different types of imagery which are typically not media. Oblique imagery, street view imagery. Yeah, these are data sets which cannot really be defined as a footprint on the ground. They're typically defined as a camera location with orientation. What is a lot of the historical imagery? That's what you're trying to find out. You're trying to find where was the image and what is the orientation. You need a model by which you can store that and manage that in large volumes. So oriented imagery handles everything from video, 360 images, aerial imagery, historical imagery, and I wanted to give a quick look at the data structure. Is extremely simple. It really is just a flat database that makes it very, very simple to integrate, to implement in any database. Naturally, you can link it to anything you want, and it's extensible. From historical imagery, really the key attributes are really what is the location of the image, the orientation approximately of the image, the acquisition date of the imagery, and then there's something called CAM-ORI. This is actually a string that can hold the precise camera orientation information, camera distortions and stuff like that. And it's a very, very efficient model. So what I want to do is, if I can get this to work, is to quickly show you a demo. We took the USGS. The USGS was mentioned before. They have 2 million images stored, which in the web. And we took the meta information and loaded it as an oriented image catalog, and created very quickly this application. So if I start zooming in, what you will start seeing, it's bringing in, whoops, let me zoom in a little bit too far. You're bringing in all these different images. As I said, it's a catalog of 2 million images, and I can zoom into a particular location, see the sort of density of the pictures, and as I zoom in, what it'll start doing is to actually bring the actual locations of each of those pictures. Those pictures originally just had XY coordinates, but we know other properties. There was some height information there. We know what a lot of people don't realize is the navigators, even 40 years ago, they were very accurate at doing the forward overlap. It's 60, the overlap is nearly always at 60% because they use the navigation scope. And we can use that to estimate, therefore, the height pretty quickly. So what we can do, we have all the meta information behind here, but if I, for example, turn on the oriented imagery viewer, let's zoom into a little bit area, click on a point, what it's going to do is to query that imagery. This imagery is just imagery stored. They're actually simple cloud-optimized geotiffs. In this case, it's actually MRF, which is very, very similar, but essentially would work with cloud-optimized geotiffs as well. And we can, for any location, see all the images that are available for this location. If I turn this viewer on, I can see that there's another, for this particular location, there's actually another image up here, which is going to cover that same point. But I could also go through time and have a look at what are the images at any other point in time. And as I pan and zoom around in the image, you will see that the footprint is approximate. It's not accurate. It's only the accuracy of, in this case, the accuracy of the orientation data. But if I click a point in the image, you'll see it draw on the ground. If I click a point on the ground, it'll go into the image. It may be off a bit, but for finding images for a specific investigation, you can very quickly use this imagery, superimpose it. This is this is what they call the medium resolution data at USGS, which is about 60 micron, so it's not the high resolution data. There are links to the metadata, and you can then download the full resolution data if you want up to full resolution data. So this gives you a way to just very quickly take meta information that you have and maintain and make it accessible either internally to your organization or externally to your organization to a very simple way. So this also works precisely. I don't actually have samples of oblique aerial imagery, but if you had your orientation of your computer orientation imagery, this is actually some oblique imagery from a digital camera in this particular case, looking over a 3D mesh. And if I zoom in and sort of pick a point, you can see how I pick a point in the image, and it puts the same point in 3D onto the ground. If I can actually superimpose in 3D. I don't have, the demo actually, you can actually bring the image up and down into the 3D mesh. So the data is superimposed directly into the three-dimensional model of the city. So I'm actually switching between. We don't realize this is actually the 3D mesh, and this is actually the actual image taken of that particular location. So the stuff can be very accurately referenced. So that's our oriented imagery catalog. The next data set is a mosaic data set. This is what we've used traditionally. It's a data model we've been using for over about 15 years, which just is based on the footprint. Where is the footprint on the ground of the imagery? And we use that for mainly satellite imagery and aerial imagery. And it allows us to define not only the meta information and the orientation parameters, but also all the other parameters, how to orthorectify and process, enhance, mosaic, and orthorectify the images. It's all defined in the model, and then as you pan and zoom around, the parameters are actually applied by ArcGIS on the fly. Because on-the-fly orthorectification, Z-wave generation, stuff like that. So you get really, really fast ability to work with these data sets. It's a more extensive data model, a little bit more complicated, but it has a lot of power within the system. And that's used for a lot of the map production components of the system. So from a map production perspective, you have imagery, and there are all sorts of different sources of imagery: drones, aerial, satellite. And typically the process is to process, well, you want to process and manage that data, generate things like the terrain models, DSMs, do the orientation, and then take that data and share it into a GIS or a BIM. So from an aerial mapping perspective, we just focus on that. We actually have two solutions. One is called orthomapping, and that's really the solution by which we generate orthos and do things like aerial triangulation, things like that. And then there's also Shore for ArcGIS. This is actually technology that ESRI acquired from a company called N-Frames in Stuttgart a couple of years ago, and that's really used for generating these very dense true orthophotos or very dense 3D meshes. So these are 3D meshes typically not generated from historical aerial imagery, typically from more digital imagery, although in theory we can do it from historical imagery as well. Typically you want more overlap. Those 3D meshes, they really work better when you have the overlaps in the sort of 60-80 overlap areas. What I want to talk a little bit about more is orthomapping. So orthomapping is a capability. If you have ArcGIS Advanced, you already have the software. Most people don't realize they actually already have it. You already have all the software. What it allows you to do is really the full photogrammetric workflows, importing orientation, doing the interior orientation, type point collection, block adjustments, DTM generation, orthomosaic, color bandaging. And I'll quickly just, I don't want to give you a tutorial on it, but I just want to give you a couple of ideas on how it works. So you basically create a new workspace. Think of a workspace as a project. You can configure what type of it is. In this case, it's going to be historical imagery. You can define some parameters like what is the coordinate system the data is in, or that you want it in. So you define your coordinate systems, and actually ESRI handles literally all the coordinate systems that exist. And you bring in your approximate meta information. You can see the kappa is, omega 5 or 0 in this particular case. We have estimates of the angles, but this is just a priori data. And then you have your image. This is really defines what we refer to as an image collection, and you just define it's a generic frame camera at this point in time. You also define an elevation model. That can be an elevation model you already have, or something like world elevation. So it needs some form of elevation to work with. And what you then does is allows you to position those frames roughly in the right place. Roughly where they are, you have roughly a terrain model, and it'll actually auto-rectify it on the fly. If you zoom in, it'll auto-rectify the images. Not going to be very good, it's going to be off. You only have approximate values. What you can then do is then measure the interior orientation. So you do measure interior orientation parameters. There are all the tools there to create the templates to go and collect the tie points. You measure the tie points. And then what you basically measure the tie points, and then what you can do is to do the block adjustments. This actually does tie point matching and bundle block adjustment. Internally, it uses a combination of both SFM as well as more traditional photogrammetric techniques to determine all the tie points, collect those, and compute all things like you can define whether it was to compute, refine the focal lengths and principal points and stuff like that. So it's for bundle block adjustment, which refines the parameters, so you can start off with literally no parameters and let them refine it. Obviously, an estimate of the focal length is very good to have to start with. So you can do the bundle block adjustment, and then you can, it'll give you a better look approximate locations, and you can then measure the ground control points. So you can measure ground control points either traditionally or using things like world elevation terrain models and terrain models that you have. In other words, if you pick a point on an existing image, it'll take that point and use that as the ground control point, and then take the terrain model and use the elevation of the model. So you're using the existing data to find essentially control points, measure control points in the images. Actually, if they're signalized or anything like that, you can obviously import those signalized points and use those as well. This is a very quick way of getting the data into the right location and doing what some people would refer to as a second generation ortho. We're generating ortho based on an existing ortho, an existing terrain model. So you can do that. Actually, you can go the traditional method and do it fully. It does you can redone the aerial triangulate and the bundle block adjustment as many times as you want, and you get an aerial triangulation report. Then you can also generate the dynamic orthos. These are the orthos which are they're dynamic in that the ortho rectification is done as you access the images. once they're accessed, you can also generate the train models. There are multiple ways of generating the train model using semi-global matching, multi-view matching, multiple ways of generating these train models, which can then be used to generate the terrain model, and then you can define things like seam lines, the DEM that you want to use in the product, and generate the product. So as a product, you can then publish that, and it becomes accessible as a service on the web. So another thing, the stereo display. Within ArcGIS, you have a stereo display. All those mosaic data sets that you have, you can open the stuff in a stereo, see even anaglyph, using the active glasses, so all the stereo capabilities are there. Very briefly, the next thing is analysis. Realize that ESRI has a huge range of different analysis tools to work with the terrain models and the images, to do various things, including things like deep learning. Deep learning is a phenomenal capability within the system. We support a lot of different modalities of the data, doing things like edge detection, change detection, working with the different types of images. So there's a huge amount of deep learning capabilities within the system. What's nice about it is that, I'll go to the next frame. Okay, yeah. So basically there are pre-trained models as well. So if you don't want to start from scratch, we actually provide pre-trained models. They don't exist yet on the historical imagery, but they do exist on other data sets. And you can take those pre-trained models and then go through the complete workflow to train, do the labeling, data preparation, train the models, do the inferencing. So the whole workflow is provided within ArcGIS. That's the next slide. Doesn't want to go to the next slide. I don't know why. Okay, I'll just go into this mode for the time being. Not going to need to work that one. So the last part is just basically the visualization component. Now these are the applications that you created. I showed one simple one earlier, which is the oriented imagery, historical imagery viewer, but you can very quickly create these applications as an extremely rich API that works with the vector data and the image data to enable you to create very advanced applications that quickly access the data and provide that capability for users to create applications, which eventually is what we're talking about, is create those applications that will really show the value. So in summary, just to realize that it's a comprehensive imagery system. It really provides these different components, and if you haven't started using it, do start using it. All these workflows are documented, and it is highly extensible and integrates with all the different orientation packages if you have. So if you're using Match AT or something like that, it's not a problem. You can import that data into the system as well. So with that, I'll just finish on that. So thank you.